Hi, my name is Janmejay and this is day 17th of my communication practice. And as you know that I'm reading this book called Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor E. Frankl. And he was a psychiatrist by training, a doctor. And this is a two-part book. One part of first part talks about his experience, his memoir of being incarcerated in the concentration camp, and the second part talks about logotherapy. So my target is to complete the book and I'm almost halfway there. So in next 13-14 days I have to cover everything. And this is a good experience. I'm trying to understand how I speak, how open my voice is, how energetic I am, how my intonation works. I'll give it a go. After once I record a video, I listen to it every single day after one day, so that I can understand what I am speaking, how I am speaking, how energetic I am, what is my body language, if it is making sense or not, my pronunciation, everything. I listen to it. But in the next few days, what I'll do in my weekends or something, I'll take notes of what I speak, how I pronounce word, so that I can practice it and work on my shortcomings. So that is the plan to improve my English speaking and communication in general. So after 30 days, I'll switch my gears. I'll try something else, probably not reading this book or reading something. Maybe I'll make impromptu videos. I'll write something down and then I'll connect the thoughts and I'll read. Maybe I'll read some fiction books to have some sort of emotional touch and other things. This is more of a factual account. It's a story, but more or less it's a non-fiction. So to understand emotion, to convey my emotions, and to develop that sort of depth in my voice, I'll do all sort of things. I'm not sure what I'll do, but that is how I'll proceed. So I'll just start reading the book again. It is very difficult for an outsider to grasp how very little value was placed on human life in camp. The camp in Mint was hardened, but possibly become more conscious of this complete disregard of human existence when a convoy of sick men was arranged. The emaciated bodies of the sick were thrown on two-wheeled carts which were drawn by prisoners for many miles, often through snowstorms, to the next camp. If one of the sick men had died before the cart left, he was thrown on anyway. The list had to be correct. The list was the only thing that mattered. A man counted only because he had a prison number. One literally became a number, dead or alive. That was unimportant. The life of a number was completely irrelevant. What stood behind that number and the life mattered even less. The fate, the history, the name of the man. In the transport of sick patients that I, in my capacity as a doctor, had to accompany from one camp in Bavaria to another, there was a young prisoner whose brother was not on the list and therefore would have to be left behind. The young man begged so long that the camp warden decided to work on exchange, and the brother took the place of a man who, at the moment, preferred to stay behind, but the list had to be correct. That was easy. The brother just exchanged number with the other prisoner. As I have mentioned before, we had no documents. Everyone was lucky to own his body, which after all was still breathing. All else about us, that is, the rags hanging from our gaunt skeletons, was only of interest if we were assigned to a transport of sick patients. The departed Muslims were examined with unabashed curiosity to see whether their coats or shoes were not better than one's own. After all, their fates was sealed. But those who stayed behind in the camp, who were still capable of some work, had to make use of every means to improve their chances of survival. They were not sentimental. The prisoners saw themselves completely dependent on the mood of the guard, playthings of fate, and this made them even less human than the circumstances warranted. So, this is how the life was given importance in the camp, and people who were being declared as Muslims, those who were unfit to work, and those whose fate was sealed. Basically, they were about to die. So those who were being transported to another camp for the killing or gassing them, people used to check out whether they have better shoes or better belongings on them so that they can exchange, and this in turn increases their chances of survival. And author says that they were insensitive, even more insensitive than the circumstances demanded. Why? Because they were conditioned that life was so little value that they were starting to become them, because that was the conditioning, that was the psyche, that was the atmosphere of the camp. In Auschwitz, I had laid down a rule for myself, which has proved to be a good one, and which most of my comrades later followed. I generally answered all kinds of questions truthfully, but I was silent about anything that was not expressly asked for. If I were asked my age, I gave it. If asked about my profession, I said doctor, but did not elaborate. The first thing in morning in Auschwitz, an SS officer came to the parade ground. We had to fall into separate groups of prisoners, over 40 years, under 40 years, metal workers, mechanics, and so forth. Then we were examined for ruptures, and some prisoners had to form a new group. The group which that I was in was driven to another hut where we were lined up again. After being sorted out once more and having answered more questions as to my age and profession, I was sent to a small group. Once more we were driven to another hut and grouped differently. This continued for some time, and I became quite unhappy finding myself among strangers who spoke unintelligible foreign languages. Then came to the last location. Then came the last selection, and I found myself in the back in the group that I had been with in the first hut. They had barely noticed that I had been sent from hut to hut in the meantime, but I was aware that in those few minutes fate had passed me in different forms. When the transport of sick patients for the rest camp was organized, my name, that is my number, was put on the list. Since a few doctors were needed, but no one was convinced that destination was really a rest camp. A few weeks previously, the same transport had been prepared. Then, too, everyone had thought it was destined for the gas ovens when it was announced that anyone who volunteered for the dreaded night shift would be taken off the transport list. 82 prisoners volunteered immediately. A quarter of an hour later, the transport was cancelled, but the 82 stayed on the list for the night shift. For the majority of them, this meant death within the next fortnight. Now, the transport for the rest camp was arranged for the second time. Again, no one knew whether this was a ruse. This was a ruse to obtain the last bit of work from the sick, if only for 14 days, or whether it would go to the gas ovens or to a genuine rest camp. The chief doctor, who had taken a liking to me, told me furtively one evening at 9:45. I have made it known in the orderly room that you can still have your name crossed off the list. You may do so up till 10 o'clock. I told him that this was not my way, that I had learned to let fate take its course. I might as well stay with my friends, I said. There was a look of pity in his eyes, as if he knew. He shook my hand silently, as through if it were a farewell, not for life but from life. Not for life but from life. Slowly I walked back to my hut. There I found a good friend waiting for me. You really want to go with them? He asked sadly. Yes, I am going. Tears came to his eyes, and I tried to comfort him. Then there was something else to do to make my will. Listen, Otto, if I don't get back home to my wife, and if you should see her again, then tell her that I talked of her daily, hourly. You remember, second, I have loved her more than anyone. Thirdly, the short time I have been married to her outweighs everything, even all we have gone through here. Otto, where are you now? Are you alive? what has happened to you since our last hour together? Did you find your wife again? And do you remember how I made you learn my will by heart, word to word, in spite of your childlike tears? The next morning, I departed with the transport. This time it was not a ruse. We were not heading for the guest chambers, and we were actually going to go to a rest camp. Those who had pitied me remained in the camp where famine was to rage even more fiercely than in our new camp. They tried to save themselves, but they only sealed their own fates. Months later, after liberation, I met a friend from the old camp. He related to me how he, as a camp policeman, had searched for a piece of human flesh that was missing from a pile of corpses. He confiscated it from a pot which he found it cooking. Cannibalism had broken out. I had left just in time. Does this not bring to mind the story of death in Tehran? A rich and mighty Persian once walked in his garden with one of his servants. The servant cried that he had just been encountered death who had threatened him. He begged his master to give him his fastest horse so that he could make haste and flee to Tehran, which he could reach the same evening. The master consented and the servant galloped off on the horse. On returning to his house, the master himself met death and questioned him, "Why did you terrify and threaten my servant?" "I did not threaten him. I did not threaten him. I only showed surprise in still finding him here when I planned to meet him tonight in Tehran," said Death. So it was a very emotional part, and I became emotional during this long hour when he was going for work for 14 days, and probably he could die there. And he made his will, and he made his friend remember those words line to line, heart by heart, and he asked him to tell how he remembers his wife the first day we met, the day separated, and how he remembers her throughout the camp. And later on, when he actually gone out of the camp, he find himself to the rest camp, and the famine was fiercely there in the camp where he left just in time. So you can understand the situation, and he talks about the story of death in Tehran, where the servant basically wanted to avoid death, but death was basically waiting for him in Tehran. And basically what he wanted to say, that you cannot escape your fate. Whatever that is being planned for you will happen, and you will be motivated to do accordingly, to fall into that zone. You can say trap, or like it's by design you will go into that fate. That sort of thing will happen. And this is one of the most emotional part of the book that I have come across so far. The atrocities didn't affected me, but this line where he's like telling about his will actually affected me. And this is day 17th of my communication practice. I'll see you in 18th video. Thanks for your time. Bye.